You never forget the first time you lead the changing of the guard. It's tradition, spectacle, and nerves, all bundled under a helmet heavy enough to make your neck sore for a week. But that morning, 10 o'clock sharp at Horse Guards Parade, London, the routine felt different. Maybe it was Atlas beneath me, or maybe it was the low autumn sun slicing across the marble and bouncing off hundreds of tourists' phone screens. My name's Owen Hartley. I'm not a hero. I just wear a uniform and do my job. But when you're in the saddle, leading a team of mounted guards past a sea of expectant faces, you feel the weight of something bigger than yourself. That's what I was thinking as I guided Atlas, the most reliable horse in our stables, straight down the parade line. Each step echoed across stone, sharp and regular, and every tourist's eye followed us like we were walking through history itself. The crowd was buzzing, the kind of low, excited hum that always makes me think of fairgrounds or soccer matches. Some people laughed, others snapped selfies. I caught bits of French, German, Mandarin. A street performer was fiddling with an old guitar near the corner, his song barely audible over the chatter. That's when it started. Atlas's ears went flat. Not the usual spook at a flapping bag or a sudden shout, this was different. He stiffened, head high, muscles twitching beneath me. My heart thudded a warning even before I spotted what he did. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man, tall, stocky, gray hoodie pulled tight, looking everywhere but at the parade. He knelt beside a little girl, maybe 7, her hair pulled back with a pink barrette. She stood motionless, but there was something off. Her eyes were darting, not at her surroundings, but at us. Atlas jerked again, nearly bumping the horse to my left. The formation wobbled. I had seconds to fix it, or the whole drill would fall apart, embarrassing the squad in front of hundreds. But then the girl did something I'll never forget. She opened her palm, tucked her thumb in, and folded her fingers over. Once, twice, 3 times. That silent SOS signal from the posters, the training slides, the newscasts. I'd read about it, never thought I'd see it for real, but there it was, clear as a bell. She wasn't just fidgeting, she was pleading. I felt everything at once, anger, fear, confusion, all fighting for space. My training said hold formation, my gut said move. Atlas chose for me. He backed up half a step, breaking our line, drawing the kind of attention you never want in uniform. The audience gasped, someone dropped a coffee. Sergeant Hensley, just behind me, hissed through his teeth. "Owen, what are you doing?" I ignored him. Atlas wouldn't settle. He pawed the marble, ready to bolt. The man in the hoodie tightened his grip on the girl's arm, eyes darting for an exit. He tried to shield his face, but it was too late. Every phone in the crowd was pointed at him now. The girl's hand flashed the signal again, urgent. I made my choice. I slid off Atlas before anyone could stop me, landing hard on the slick marble. My radio bounced off my belt. I pressed it to my mouth. Unit 1, possible child abduction, Horse Guards Parade, man, gray hoodie, girl, polka dot dress, urgent. Tourists shrank back as I moved, a ripple of alarm in the crowd. The man yanked the girl, pulling her toward the nearest exit at the corner of Whitehall. She stumbled. He barked at her to hurry. The street performer's song stuttered and died. I shouted, "Stop!" but the man kept going, using the chaos as cover. I was gaining, but he was strong, dragging the girl faster now. She tripped, skinning her knee, but he didn't slow down. Suddenly, Atlas charged past me, riderless. I'd never seen him do that. He cut across the parade ground, massive hooves hammering the stone. The crowd scattered. The man froze as Atlas bore down, stopping short just inches away, rearing up in a shower of sparks. For a second, nobody moved. Then Atlas slammed his hooves down, blocking the exit. The man let go. The girl ran, straight into my arms. She sobbed, clinging to my jacket. "It's okay," I whispered, steadying her. "You're safe now." Police officers finally reached us. The man tried to run, but Atlas was faster, herding him into the arms of 2 constables. People cheered, some cried, and phones filmed every second. I held the girl tight. She buried her face against me, shaking. Atlas stood guard over us, his breathing steady, as if this was all just another drill. Somewhere in the chaos, I realized the world had just seen everything. And I knew, deep down, nothing in my life would be the same again. The aftermath of that moment was a blur of voices, uniforms, and flashing lights. I kept my arm around the little girl, trying to shield her from the sea of strangers and cell phones. Atlas stood nearby, his chest rising and falling, ears twitching at every sharp noise. If he felt the pressure, he didn't show it. He was still the calm in the storm. Sergeant Hensley stormed over, his jaw tight. "Owen, you broke formation. What the hell were you thinking?" "I saw the SOS sign," I said. My voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but every word was clear. She needed help. He stared at me like I'd just confessed to robbing a bank. "You could have jeopardized the entire parade and the horse." He charged out of line. I glanced at Atlas, then back at Hensley. "Would you rather I stood still and let a child get taken?" He didn't answer, just shook his head and walked off to shout orders at the rest of the team. Around us, tourists whispered, snapped more pictures, and started sharing videos online faster than I could process what had just happened. In minutes, the story would be everywhere. Paramedics arrived, checking the girl. Her name was Mia. I learned from the small, trembling voice that finally spoke after a long stretch of silence. No major injuries, just a scraped knee and a bruise on her arm where the man had grabbed her. She clung to my sleeve, not letting go even when a kind-faced paramedic tried to offer her water. Police officers hauled the man, later identified as Gareth Fox, into a squad car. He didn't look at me, but I felt his stare like a knife on my back. There was no panic in his eyes, just calculation, like he was already working on his next move. The square slowly cleared. The parade was canceled, the remaining guards dismissed in tight, silent groups. I walked Mia to the police van myself, letting her ride Atlas for the short trip across the square. Her fingers twisted nervously in his mane, but her eyes grew a shade brighter. She even managed a small smile when Atlas nuzzled her shoulder. At Charing Cross Police Station, the energy shifted. The chaos faded to a kind of clinical hush. Gray walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of cheap instant coffee. Mia sat in a small interview room with a child welfare officer. Through the glass, I could see her drawing on a scrap of paper, lost in concentration. A detective led me to a different room, pulled out a notebook, and began asking questions. "Start from the top. Why did you break protocol?" "She signaled for help. Atlas sensed it before I did, honestly." "Describe the signal." I showed him with my own hand. Open palm, thumb tucked, fingers curled. "It's the SOS sign." She repeated it several times. He wrote that down, frowning. "You recognized it right away?" "Yeah, training videos, posters in the break room." "Why do you think you saw it when nobody else did?" I shrugged. "I watch people. That's half the job." The detective looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "And the horse?" "He moved first. If Atlas hadn't broken formation, I might have missed her. I trust him." The interview dragged on, questions circling the same points. Did I fear repercussions for acting outside the script? Did I realize the cameras were rolling? Would I do it again? My answers never changed. When they finally let me go, I found Atlas in a side stable, already settled in with a fresh blanket and a bucket of water. He greeted me with a low nicker, nudged my shoulder as if to say, "What took you so long?" I stroked his nose and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You did good today, partner." Charlie, one of the stable hands, poked her head in. "He's a legend already. There's a video, hasn't even been an hour, and it's everywhere." I shook my head, half in disbelief, half in exhaustion. "We'll see what the higher-ups say." She grinned. "You saved a kid. I'd say you've got public opinion on your side." That didn't erase the knot in my stomach. I knew there'd be a review, maybe a suspension, maybe worse. The force didn't like surprises, even when the right thing happened for the right reasons. Back inside, I saw Mia's mother had arrived. She ran to her daughter, dropping to her knees, hugging her so tight it looked like she'd never let go. Tears, laughter, words I couldn't quite hear. I stepped back, feeling like an intruder in their joy. I left the station just as the sun was starting to dip behind the buildings, painting the city gold and gray. I paused outside, the weight of the day finally settling. I could already picture the headlines, the investigations, the debates about rules and instincts. But all I could really think about was that little hand making the SOS sign, and Atlas, always one step ahead. Maybe instincts aren't about breaking the rules. Maybe they're about knowing exactly when the rules need to bend. The next morning, the city felt strangely quiet, as if all of London was holding its breath. At Charing Cross Police Station, the noise of the street faded behind thick glass doors and security checks, replaced by a low hum, footsteps on tile, the occasional phone ringing, and the distant clatter of keys. I followed a constable down a narrow hallway. The adrenaline from yesterday was gone, leaving only fatigue and a heavy feeling in my chest. They led me to a room with 2 battered chairs and a scratched table. I sat down, hands folded, and tried to remember every detail. The fluorescent lights made everything look washed out. Outside, it had started to rain again. After a few minutes, a detective came in. He was older, gray hair, tired eyes. He didn't waste time. "Officer Hartley, can you describe the events again in your own words?" So I did. I talked about the parade, the crowd, Atlas's sudden reaction, Mia's hand signal. I described the man, the way he looked through people instead of at them. I told him how I'd made the decision to leave formation, to jump down and intervene. The detective nodded, jotting notes, sometimes asking me to slow down or clarify. He asked about the SOS signal, how I recognized it, what training I'd received. I told him about the posters, the safety briefings, how I'd practiced with my own kids at home, just in case. When I finished, he set his pen down. "You realize there'll be an internal review." "Yeah," I said. "I figured." He didn't look judgmental, just resigned. It's the way things go. Paperwork first, questions later. I nodded. As long as she's safe, I can live with that. There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long. He finally glanced up. "You did the right thing, Hartley. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When I stepped back into the corridor, I found Rosie from Child Welfare waiting outside another door. She smiled tiredly. "Mia's with us now. She's a tough one." "Has her mom arrived yet?" "On her way. The first train from Birmingham. She'll be here soon." I looked through the observation window. Mia sat on a plastic chair, holding a battered teddy bear someone had dug out of the lost and found. She was small, but her posture was straight, and her eyes were locked on the door. She'd stopped crying, but you could see the storm still there under her calm. Rosie noticed me watching. She asked if you'd check on Atlas. That surprised me. I hadn't expected her to care about the horse after everything. But maybe, in her mind, he'd been just as much a hero as anyone else. "I will," I promised. I made my way to Wellington Barracks, pulling my coat tight against the drizzle. The city was waking up. Buses crawling by, people heading to work, most unaware of the drama that had played out in the center of London the day before. Inside the stables, it was warm and smelled of hay and saddle soap. Atlas was standing quietly in his stall, munching on oats, but his ears pricked up when he saw me. "Hey, partner," I said, patting his neck. "Heard you've made quite a name for yourself." He pressed his head against my shoulder, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. I stood there for a while, just breathing with him, letting the calm of the stable seep into my bones. Charlie, the groom, walked over. "He's all right. Vets checked him out. Heart rate was high, but nothing serious. He's been a bit restless, though. After what happened, can't blame him." Charlie looked at me. "You okay?" I shrugged. "Ask me after the review board." She grinned. "They'll come around. Public's already on your side. You should see the news. Hero horse saves girl in daylight drama. He's got more fans than some footballers now." I laughed, shaking my head. He just did what he always does. He watches, listens. Charlie nodded, thoughtful. Maybe more of us should do that. I stayed with Atlas for a while, letting the day slow down. Outside, the rain turned to mist. Inside, the other horses snorted and shifted, the familiar sounds grounding me. It was a moment of peace, a break in the storm. Eventually, I headed back to the station. Mia's mother had arrived. I watched through the glass as they reunited. A long hug, tears, relief so raw you could feel it in the air. Rosie caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded, swallowing hard. That afternoon, I filed my report and answered a dozen more questions. There would be more, I knew. Reviews, meetings, maybe even headlines. But right then, I only cared that a little girl was safe and that Atlas was back in his stall. Late that night, I walked through the empty parade ground, boots echoing on wet stone. The city was quiet again. I paused by Atlas's stall, watching him sleep standing up, his breathing slow and steady. "Good job," I whispered. He flicked an ear, almost like he understood. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the ones with no audience, no headlines, that mean the most. Just a man, a horse, and the sense that for once, instinct had been stronger than protocol. By the weekend, the chaos from the parade had faded just enough that I could almost believe life was getting back to normal. I had my boys with me, Ethan and Max, both loud, hungry, and full of questions that only kids can ask. I promised them a visit to the Royal Mews, partly because they loved horses, and partly because I needed to see Atlas, to feel that everything really was okay. We arrived early, before the first wave of tourists. The sky was clear, the city humming quietly in the background. As we walked through the high gates, Ethan's eyes went wide at the rows of gleaming carriages, gold and crimson, lined up like props from a fairy tale. Max darted ahead, counting each horse he saw, shouting their colors and asking, "Is that one as fast as Atlas?" Atlas, as always, was waiting for us. The stable master waved us in with a knowing smile. He's been restless. Think he's waiting for his partner. I stroked Atlas's nose and introduced him to the boys. Ethan wasn't shy. He stepped right up, hand flat, giggling when Atlas nuzzled his palm for a sugar cube. Max hung back at first, but when Atlas dipped his head, calm and patient, Max grinned and stepped forward too. "Dad, how do they train horses for parades and rescues?" Ethan asked, brushing his hand along Atlas's neck. "It takes months," I explained. "They start with loud noises, crowds, sudden movements, getting the horses used to anything that might happen. They learn to stay calm, follow signals, and trust their riders. Atlas is one of the best." Charlie, the stable hand, overheard and joined in. "You know, there's a legend about the household cavalry. They say the horses can sense trouble before we can. That's why they've saved so many lives." Max's eyes widened, like superheroes? I smiled. "Something like that. But it's not just about heroics. Horses have always been a part of English culture, not just in wars and parades, but in daily life. They were our first real partners, carrying mail, plowing fields, even delivering firemen to emergencies." Ethan nodded, thoughtful. "Atlas is my favorite." I ruffled his hair. "He's mine too." We spent a while longer in the stables. I walked the boys around, showing them the ceremonial tack room, letting them watch as Charlie checked each stall. Everything seemed in order, almost too normal, considering what had happened only days before. But then Charlie called me over, her voice low. "Something's not right," she whispered. "Last night, the camera over Atlas's stall cut out for about 10 minutes. I checked the wires, looked like they'd been twisted, not chewed or frayed, on purpose." I frowned. "Anyone see anything?" She shook her head. "No sign of a break-in, but I found this." She held out a small plastic bag with a tiny metal device, barely bigger than a thumb drive. "What is it?" I asked. "Not sure. Looks like a camera. Maybe someone tried to record the stall, or watch when no one was around." A chill ran through me. I glanced at Atlas, standing quietly in his stall, oblivious to the extra attention. "We should tell security," I said. "Already did. They're reviewing the tapes, but if someone did sneak in, they knew what they were doing." I looked at my boys, still laughing with the younger horses at the far end of the barn. The last thing I wanted was to worry them, so I forced a smile and changed the subject when they ran back to me. "Can we ride Atlas?" Ethan begged. "Not today, buddy. He's had a busy week, but you can help brush him if you want." They took turns, gently running brushes along his coat. Atlas seemed to enjoy it, standing perfectly still and closing his eyes. As we finished up, the stable master pulled me aside. "Keep your guard up, Owen. If someone's targeting the horses, or you, it might not be over." I nodded, that uneasy feeling returning. "I'll watch out." Walking home with the boys, I replayed the events in my head. The crowd, the signal, Fox's cold stare, and now cameras in the stalls. It felt like a warning. That night, after the boys were asleep, I called the station and reported everything, every detail, even the smallest thing that seemed odd. As I hung up, I checked the news again. The story was still everywhere. Videos of Atlas, headlines calling him a hero horse, debates about protocol versus instinct. But under it all was the sense that someone out there was watching, waiting for another chance. Before I went to bed, I watched the boys sleeping, their faces peaceful, the world's danger miles away. I realized that being a parent, a police officer, or even just a decent person, all it really means is staying alert, being ready to step up when you're needed, and holding on to the good things for as long as you can. Down in the stables, Atlas waited too. And somewhere outside, in the city's darkness, I knew this was just the calm before another storm. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me out of a half-dream. I blinked at the screen, still foggy from sleep. An unknown number flashed. Instinct told me to answer. "Officer Hartley?" The voice was clipped, tense. It was Detective Grace Pemberton from the Met. "Sorry to wake you. Fox escaped during transfer to Brixton. He's not alone. They had help. 2 masked men hit the prison van near Vauxhall. 1 guard's in the hospital. Fox and another suspect are at large." My stomach dropped. "Are you serious?" "We're tracking all exits. Be on alert. He knows your face, and after what happened, you're a loose end." I sat up, swinging my legs out of bed, the old aches from years of riding flaring up in my knees. My hands trembled as I pressed the phone tighter. "What about the barracks, the horses? We have extra patrols on Whitehall, but it's worth telling your people to double-check everything." I was already halfway dressed before she finished speaking. "I'm going over now." The city was slick and silent, streetlights glowing in puddles. I called the stable master as I walked, my voice sharper than I meant. "Get everyone on high alert. Check all cameras. Don't leave Atlas alone. If you see anything strange, call the police. Don't try to be a hero." When I reached the barracks, the air was tense, guards posted at every door, radios crackling with static. Charlie met me near the rear paddock, her raincoat slick with mist. "What's going on?" she asked. "Fox escaped. He's got help. I think he might come here. We need to check everything, now." She nodded, her face pale in the yellow security light. We started our rounds, checking every stall, every gate, every feed bin. Atlas was restless, stomping his hooves, nostrils flaring as if he sensed something none of us could see. I tried to calm him, running my hand down his neck. Suddenly, a noise cracked from the far side of the stables, a clang of metal, too sharp to be the wind. I spun, flashlight sweeping. There, in the shadow near the feed room, a dark shape moved. "Who's there?" I barked. No answer, just the scuffle of hurried footsteps. Charlie was already on the radio, calling for backup. I crept forward, heart thudding, baton ready. My breath was loud in my ears. As I rounded the corner, I caught a glimpse. A figure in black, hunched over the feed bin, something glinting in his hand. Another shape stood watch by the door. They moved fast, not like amateurs. I lunged, grabbing the closest arm. We crashed into a pile of feed sacks, grain flying. He struggled, strong, wild. I barely managed to cuff his wrist, adrenaline giving me an edge. The other man bolted for the exit. I shouted after him, but he was gone in seconds, swallowed by the dark. Charlie and 2 guards pinned the man I'd caught. His accent was foreign, breath sour with fear. We yanked a syringe from his pocket, the label half peeled. Veterinary tranquilizer, strong enough to drop a horse Atlas's size in seconds. Atlas screamed, a high, angry noise I'd never heard from him before. He kicked at the stall, eyes rolling, wild with panic. I ran to him, whispering, "Easy, boy, you're safe." But I couldn't shake the thought we'd only just caught them in time. Police arrived fast, their lights flashing blue and white against the brick walls. They took the man away, bagged the syringe, swept the grounds for clues. Charlie leaned on the stable door, face pale. They wanted him dead. I nodded. They wanted to send a message. We're getting too close. She shook her head, fear in her eyes. This isn't just about you or Atlas. They're scared. As the police questioned us, a feeling settled over me, darker than the night, heavier than any weight I'd carried before. Fox and his people weren't just running, they were lashing out, covering tracks. I sat in Atlas's stall until dawn, watching his sides rise and fall, listening to the city waking up, sirens echoing faintly. I realized there's a certain loneliness in being a target, in knowing danger might be just around the corner and you're the one standing in the way. But I also knew we'd be ready. When the sun finally broke over the barracks, painting gold through the windows, Atlas stood calm again, ears forward, as if waiting for whatever came next. So was I. When the phone rang just after sunrise, I was already awake, boots on, adrenaline still humming from the night before. The voice on the other end was sharp, anxious, a young constable on duty at Met headquarters. "Hartley, you need to get to Westminster. CCTV caught Fox near Parliament. He's on the move. Possible accomplice on a bike. They're headed south. Looks like a getaway." I was out the door before I'd even registered the cold. Atlas met me at the stables, still edgy from the attempted poisoning. He pawed the straw, nostrils flaring as I buckled his bridle, my hands moving on muscle memory alone. Charlie rushed up behind me. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "They're desperate. They'll do something reckless. I have to go." She hesitated, then tossed me a radio and the barest hint of a smile. "Bring him back safe." I led Atlas into the street, the city just starting to stir. The lights were different at this hour, softer, the shadows long and uncertain. As soon as I mounted, Atlas seemed to understand, falling into a steady, purposeful stride. We cut through empty back alleys, then out into the morning rush near Whitehall, ignoring the stares of commuters and early tourists. The radio crackled. "Suspect heading east, now on Westminster Bridge. Officer, do you have visual?" I scanned ahead. Fox was there, gray hoodie, moving fast, shoving past startled pedestrians. Another man, thinner, dark helmet, started up a stolen moped, weaving dangerously through the crowd. "Unit 1, I have visual. In pursuit." Atlas surged forward, the rhythm of his hooves loud on the tarmac. The city seemed to split around us, people stepping back, phones raised. I shouted, "Police, move!" as we barreled through the jam. Fox saw me and broke into a run, glancing back, panic twisting his features. The moped lurched into traffic, horn blaring, nearly clipping a cyclist. Fox sprinted across the bridge, feet slipping on the damp pavement. For a moment, it looked like he'd get lost in the swarm, but Atlas and I pressed on, closing the gap. This was different than any parade. This was chaos, danger, real life, and I felt every heartbeat like a drum in my chest. Fox vaulted the bridge rail, landing on the narrow footpath below. I swung Atlas left, guiding him down the steps. The crowd gasped, scattered. Someone shouted, "Are you crazy?" But Atlas never faltered. We reached the lower path, just as Fox's accomplice spun the moped around, trying to block our way. He pulled something from his jacket, a length of chain, swinging it wildly. I ducked, yanked Atlas's reins, dodged just in time. The moped skidded, almost crashing into the railing. Fox darted along the embankment, desperate, glancing everywhere for escape. I pressed my radio. Suspects moving south along the Thames, foot and moped, request backup on Lambeth side. No answer, just static. Atlas and I pressed on, weaving through bollards, over uneven pavement, dodging benches and scattering pigeons. The city faded to a blur. The only thing that mattered was the figure running ahead and the horse beneath me, never hesitating. At Lambeth Bridge, Fox tried to double back, but police cruisers screeched into view, blocking his path. He spun, eyes wild, and made a last-ditch leap over the embankment wall, landing hard on the lower walkway just above the water. I steered Atlas right down the narrow steps, a move no parade commander would ever authorize. We thundered after Fox, the echo of hooves against stone, loud as thunder. Finally, Fox ran out of road, cornered at the edge of a mooring dock, water lapping at the concrete. He turned, desperate, eyes darting. I slowed Atlas, circling, blocking his escape. The accomplice on the moped skidded up behind, dropping the chain and fumbling for something in his pocket. I called out, "Don't, it's over, don't make it worse." Fox lunged for a boat's loose rope, as if to jump or maybe to swim. In a flash, Atlas surged forward, blocking him, hooves digging in. I jumped down, baton drawn, and tackled Fox just as he reached the water's edge. We crashed to the ground, rolling dangerously close to the river. He fought hard, but I had the advantage. Atlas stood over us, a living wall, snorting, ready to protect. The moped accomplice saw his chance to run, but tripped over his own chain, landing face first on the dock. Police piled in seconds later, cuffing both men. It was over. Sirens wailed, people shouted. My heart pounded. Atlas's breath steamed in the chilly morning, and I hugged his neck without thinking. The lead officer clapped my back. "Hell of a pursuit, Hartley. You and that horse. Never seen anything like it." As I caught my breath, I realized how close it had all come, how easily one wrong step, one moment of hesitation could have changed everything. Atlas just stood there, ears forward, as if to say, "What's next?" And I knew, whatever storm was coming, I wouldn't face it alone. The dock was chaos. Fox was cuffed, face down on the cold boards, his accomplice moaning, blood trickling from a scraped chin. Police officers called for backup, shouting instructions, as curious tourists and early commuters formed a loose, gawking crowd. Sirens bounced off the water, and the damp wind made my jacket cling to my skin. I tried to catch my breath, still half in the moment, my heart racing, the adrenaline refusing to fade. Atlas stood just behind me, still and steady, his massive body a wall of reassurance. A few people in the crowd pointed, murmuring about the hero horse, snapping photos with shaking hands. He didn't seem to notice. He was locked on to the scene, watching every movement. I knelt beside Fox. "It's over," I said, low and direct. He looked up, blood on his lips, a strange light in his eyes. "You think you've stopped anything?" he spat. "You think this changes it?" "It's done," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm, but my insides twisted. The way he said it, like a threat, not a warning. The officers moved to load Fox and his accomplice into the waiting vans, but suddenly a commotion broke out at the edge of the dock. A third man, lean, tense, face hidden beneath a baseball cap, shoved his way through the crowd, knife flashing in his hand. He grabbed a tourist, a young woman in a red jacket, yanking her back, pressing the blade to her neck. "Everyone stay back!" he screamed. The crowd recoiled. He dragged her toward the water, panic in his eyes. "I swear I'll do it!" Everything slowed for a second. The police hesitated, hands hovering over their holsters. The woman whimpered, frozen in shock. Atlas stepped forward, hooves thudding on the wood. I raised both hands, trying to keep the man talking, trying to keep his focus off the horse. "Nobody has to get hurt. Let her go. You're outnumbered." He shook his head, wild and desperate. "Nobody move! I'll kill her! I will!" Atlas and I locked eyes. It was like he knew what I needed. I eased sideways, drawing the man's attention, keeping my voice low and steady. "There's nowhere left to run. Let her go, and you'll walk away alive." He glanced around, hand shaking. The crowd was silent. The police were frozen. The woman closed her eyes, bracing for the worst. That's when Atlas moved. Smooth and silent, he stepped between the man and the water, muscles coiled. The man's eyes widened, unsure, but he didn't let go. I inched closer. Let her go. Last chance. Atlas took another step. His bulk blocked the escape route, his head lowered, eyes fixed on the attacker. The man shouted, waving the knife, "Stay back!" But Atlas was trained for this, trained for danger, for chaos, for reading a threat. With a sudden motion, he surged forward, his knee shooting up and catching the man's wrist. The knife flew, clattering onto the dock and skittering away. I lunged, tackling the man from the side. He tried to twist free, but I pinned him down, arms locked. The woman stumbled back into the arms of a waiting officer, sobbing with relief. Atlas backed up, snorting, and stomped once on the dock. It echoed like a gunshot. Armed police swarmed the scene, cuffing the attacker, retrieving the knife. The crowd burst into applause, not the wild cheer of a football match, but a grateful, awed sound that rose and faded quickly. I stood, wiping sweat from my brow. "Thanks," I said quietly to Atlas, who just flicked his ears as if to say, "Anytime." The officers took statements, loaded the suspects into vans, checked on the tourists. The woman in the red jacket found me, her hands still trembling. "Thank you. You and the horse. You saved my life." "It was Atlas," I said, smiling. "He's braver than any of us." Word spread fast. Within half an hour, footage from 3 different angles was already on social media. Atlas's move, my tackle, the woman's escape. Reporters swarmed the area. Someone from the Met's press office called, asking for a statement. I brushed them off. Right now, all I wanted was quiet. As the dock emptied, I led Atlas along the riverbank. The city was waking up, the sky soft and pale. I walked in silence, one hand on his bridle, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Charlie called as we reached the stables. "You both all right?" "We are now," I said. She laughed. "You know, he's not just a horse, he's a legend." I stroked Atlas's mane, thinking about all the times he'd kept his cool, how he always seemed to know what I was thinking, what I needed. Yeah, he really is. As I settled Atlas in for a much-deserved rest, I realized how much had changed. The city felt different. I felt different. Maybe it was just relief, or maybe it was the knowledge that, this time, the good guys had won. But I knew the fight wasn't over. Fox's words haunted me. "You think this changes it?" There were still questions, still shadows, still danger out there. But for now, I was grateful. Grateful for Atlas, for a little girl's signal, for every second where instinct and courage mattered more than any rulebook ever could. And for the first time in a long time, as the morning light spilled through the stable windows, I felt hope. The day of the trial at Old Bailey arrived gray and drizzly, London's signature mood. I stood outside the courthouse, hands shoved deep in my coat pockets, watching officers and journalists funnel through the doors. Even after everything, the nerves buzzed inside me. Not fear exactly, but the pressure to get it right. I thought about Mia, about the crowded horse guards, about Atlas calmly waiting at the stables. Inside, the main courtroom was packed. Journalists with notebooks and cameras, lawyers with stacks of files, and in the front row, Mia and her mother, quiet and resolute. My eyes met theirs, and she gave me a small, brave wave. I nodded back, hoping it gave her some comfort. The prosecution made their case quickly. They had everything: security footage, mobile phone videos, radio logs, eyewitnesses. One by one, they played the videos for the court. The chaos on the parade ground, Atlas blocking Fox, the sprint through Westminster, the confrontation on the dock. Each new angle made the danger clearer, the intentions of Fox and his men impossible to deny. Fox sat stone-faced at the defendant's table, hands folded, eyes narrowed. His lawyers argued about process, about intent, about confusion in the crowd. But every time they tried to muddy the water, the evidence pulled things back into sharp focus. The faces of the children listed in Fox's encrypted messages, the syringe found at the stable, the look of terror in Mia's eyes, frozen in frame. When it was my turn on the stand, the prosecutor asked the question I'd expected. Did you knowingly break formation and protocol during the parade? I didn't hesitate. Yes, because I recognized the child's SOS signal. I saw fear. My horse, Atlas, felt it first. The defense tried to twist my words. So you thought you knew better than your orders? No, I answered. I trusted my instincts and my horse. If that was wrong, I'll stand by it. They couldn't shake me. I was tired of being shaken. Mia testified too. She sat straight in the chair, voice small but steady, and explained the signal she'd learned in school, the signal that had saved her. Her mother cried quietly in the back row. After a week, the jury found Fox and his accomplices guilty on all counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy to traffic minors, and assaulting officers. The judge's voice was low and sharp as she handed down life sentences without parole. She called Fox's actions a threat to every child in this country. The relief hit me in slow waves, not like a celebration, but the end of a long illness. Outside the courtroom, reporters shouted questions. I just shook my head, waved them off, and found Mia and her mom in the hallway. Mia looked up at me, her hand clutching a ribbon. "For Atlas," she said, and pressed it into my palm. Blue and yellow, clumsily tied, but it meant more than any medal. Back at the stables, Atlas stood by the door, already sensing the tension was gone. I told him everything, about the trial, about Mia, about the ribbon. He nickered, nudging my shoulder. Charlie laughed from the next stall. "He knew you'd bring him something." A few days later, an unexpected letter arrived, sealed with the crest of the Ministry of Defense. I opened it carefully, half expecting an official reprimand for breaking protocol. Instead, it was an invitation, a ceremony at Wellington Barracks. I was to bring Atlas. The Dickin Medal was to be awarded for unmatched animal bravery in defense of human life. Only a handful of animals had ever received it. Atlas would join their ranks. The day of the ceremony was bright, almost defiant in its cheer. The parade ground was lined with officers, school children, and more cameras than I could count. The Secretary of Defense read the citation aloud. "For extraordinary courage and quick response under duress, preventing the loss of innocent life." They pinned the medal to Atlas's bridle. He stood still as a statue, accepting the cheers, the cameras, and the handful of sugar cubes I slipped him after. Mia and her mother were there, front row. I caught her eye as I spoke to the crowd. "I wasn't the hero that day," I said. "I just followed where I was led. Atlas saw the danger before I did. He didn't ask for medals, he just acted." After the ceremony, the MOD officials shook my hand. To my surprise, there was no talk of censure, no warnings, just a quiet acknowledgement. Sometimes the rules have to be bent for the right reasons. That night, the barracks felt different. Officers nodded, offering quiet congratulations. Some even asked about the SOS signal, how to recognize it, what to do. The world had changed, just a little. I lingered with Atlas in his stall, the medal hanging beside the ribbon Mia had given. The noise of London faded outside. It was just the two of us, quiet in the dim light, the weight of the week finally lifting. "Good job, partner," I whispered. Atlas pressed his forehead against my shoulder. I closed my eyes, grateful that, for once, courage and instinct had made a difference. After the whirlwind of the trial and ceremony, life returned to its slow, ordinary rhythm, or at least it pretended to. Some days, the headlines still flashed my name and Atlas's picture, but most people moved on, as people do. Only a few understood how deeply the events had changed me. It's a strange thing, stepping out of the action and back into daily life, with its quiet moments and lingering questions. One afternoon, I found myself in a radio studio off Oxford Circus, invited for a panel about courage and conscience in modern policing. The walls were lined with old jazz records and the smell of burnt coffee. Across from me sat Dr. Helen Brooks, a child welfare expert, and Sergeant Patel, a 20-year veteran who'd seen his share of chaos. The host, a calm-voiced journalist, led us through the story for the millionth time. But this time, the focus wasn't on drama, it was on why. "Officer Hartley," the host asked, "can you tell us about the moment you broke protocol? Did you hesitate?" I looked at my hands, remembering. Yeah, I hesitated, that's the truth. I thought about what it would mean, the fallout, the rules, but then I saw Mia signal and I saw Atlas move. I realized some rules aren't made for every situation. Sometimes instinct tells you what the rules can't. Dr. Brooks nodded. That's the hardest lesson for a lot of professionals. We teach rules for consistency, for safety. But children especially need adults who can see past the script. The host leaned forward. "What would you say to others in your shoes?" I paused. You have to observe. You have to be willing to act, even if it means standing alone. I won't say it's always the right call, but sometimes it's the only call. Sergeant Patel shared a story about a similar moment, his own decision to ignore an order, just once, to save someone's life. You'll remember it forever, and sometimes you pay for it, but you sleep at night. After the broadcast, a producer handed me a stack of letters from listeners. Most were simple thanks, but a few stood out. One from a teacher in Liverpool who'd shown her students the video of Mia's rescue. Another from a retired officer who wrote, "It's easy to judge from the outside, but harder when you're the one holding the line." The one that stuck with me was from a little boy. How did you know when to break the rules? I carried that question home, letting it rattle in my mind. Was it just luck, or was it training, or something deeper? The truth was, there's no manual for those moments. You pay attention, you trust your gut, you hope you're not wrong. Sometimes you are, but sometimes it's the difference between life and tragedy. A few days later, I sat down with a panel of other officers and experts at a university conference. The topic was Discipline versus Humanity, Where's the Line? The room was packed. Students, young cadets, even some old-timers who'd seen every rule come and go. A law professor asked, "Officer Hartley, do you worry that your story might encourage others to disregard protocol too quickly?" I considered my answer. Honestly, I do worry, but I also hope it makes people pay attention. Rules matter, they keep chaos at bay. But rules aren't a substitute for judgment or compassion. In our job, you have to know when to listen to your training and when to listen to your heart. Another student asked about Atlas. "Do you think animals have that same sense of when to act?" I smiled. Atlas knew before I did. Horses feel danger, fear, intent. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's the bond we build. But he reacted for the right reason. Sometimes, the best partner you have isn't even human. Afterwards, I took Atlas for a walk around the barracks, away from cameras and crowds. The city was noisy, life bustling all around, but for a little while, it was just us and the steady rhythm of his hooves on stone. He stopped once, ears flicked back, as if he was listening for something I couldn't hear. I thought about the value of what we'd done, not just in medals or headlines, but in how it rippled out. Police forces started new training for recognizing silent SOS signals. Schools taught kids to use them. Videos from that day became lessons for cadets. Even my own boys paid closer attention, asking questions I never thought they would. One night, after dinner, Ethan looked up and asked, "Dad, do you ever regret it, breaking the rule?" I shook my head. No, not when I think about what could have happened. Sometimes you have to risk getting in trouble to do the right thing. Max piped up, "Atlas never gets in trouble. He's just a hero." I laughed, grateful for the innocence that made the world simple again. Later, as I sat with Atlas in his quiet stall, I felt the truth settle in. The world runs on rules, but it changes, sometimes for the better, when people dare to step beyond them, just long enough to save a life. And in those rare, bright moments, the value of instinct, courage, and a little humanity will always outweigh the cost. Autumn came early that year. I could feel it in the air, crisp, restless, a whisper that things were changing. The headlines faded, the trial was old news, and most of London had moved on. But for me, some stories never end. They echo, quietly, through every routine morning and every silent night in the barracks. One bright Saturday, Mia and her mother came to visit the stables. There was no press this time, just us and a few rays of sun filtering through the dust. Mia walked right up to Atlas's stall, her step sure, her fear gone. She reached out and ran her hand through his mane, pausing every now and then to whisper something only horses and children seem to understand. Her mother stood beside me, watching, tears brimming but unshed. "She sleeps through the night now," she said. "She tells everyone at school Atlas is her silent hero." I smiled. "She's the brave one. She made herself seen." Mia turned and looked at me, her hand still on Atlas. "You listened when I asked for help. He did too. He's a quiet hero." It struck me how simple it sounded, heroism. But it isn't loud or showy. It's about watching, about stepping up, about being there at the moment someone needs you most. Before they left, Mia slipped something into my hand, a tiny friendship bracelet made of red and blue string. "For Atlas," she said, "so he remembers me." "He'll never forget," I promised. The weeks that followed brought more change than I'd expected. The Metropolitan Police rolled out a new training module. Every officer, new or old, was drilled in recognizing silent signals of distress. Posters went up in every underground station, at every bus stop, in airports, shopping malls, and schools. "If you see this hand sign, act. Don't wait. You could save a life." I started visiting schools, sometimes with Atlas in tow. He became a minor celebrity in his own right, kids giggling as he nodded for carrots or let them braid his mane. At every stop, I told them what I'd learned. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pay attention. I watched teachers wiping their eyes as children raised their hands, eager to be part of something bigger than themselves. Even outside the job, I saw change. At the grocery store, on the bus, in line at the pharmacy, people looked up, met each other's eyes, a little more aware. I heard stories of strangers stepping in, not just for children, but for neighbors, for lost tourists, for anyone who looked a bit out of place, a bit in need. It didn't solve every problem. Nothing ever does. But it was a start. One afternoon, I was invited to a panel with animal behaviorists and historians, experts discussing the role of horses in modern life. Most people think of police horses as ceremonial, a nod to tradition. But after what happened, the city saw them differently. They were more than symbols. They were partners, living, breathing reminders that sometimes instinct and loyalty matter more than routine. One professor asked me, "Why do you think Atlas knew what to do?" I thought for a moment. He pays attention. He listens with his whole body. Horses feel what we can't say out loud. Maybe that's why people trust them. Maybe it's why I trust him. The professor smiled. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind is slow to see. Later, I walked back through the stables, feeling the hush settle as the sun dropped behind the rooftops. I stopped by Atlas's stall and found the bracelet Mia had made, looped gently around a hook. I tied it to his bridle. He shook his mane as if to say, "Enough of this fuss," but I saw the way he leaned into my shoulder when I scratched his neck. That night, as I walked home, I thought about everything this journey had taught me. There were 3 things that stood out above the rest. First, pay attention. Most people are so busy, so distracted, they miss the signs all around them. A glance, a signal, a tremor in someone's voice. The smallest moment can save a life. Second, act when it matters. Don't wait for orders if your gut tells you to move. Protocol is important, but sometimes courage lives in those who are willing to step outside the line. Third, compassion is the law's greatest ally. Rules keep us safe, but it's the heart that tells us when to break them for the right reasons. Without empathy, the law is just a cold cage. Before turning in for the night, I stopped by the stables once more. Atlas stood quietly, breathing slow and steady, as if the world outside couldn't touch him here. I leaned in and whispered, "Thanks, partner, for being the hero nobody saw coming." He stamped a hoof, just once, a low, confident sound in the darkness. And as the city settled down, I realized that the story wasn't really about me or even Atlas. It was about all of us, the teachers, the children, the officers, the strangers who chose to look, to listen, and to care. Sometimes the smallest act of attention can change the world, and sometimes the quietest heroes make the loudest difference.